What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 748. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, what's going on, man? Missed you at the PT.
Yeah, it's unfortunate timing that I couldn't make it, but such things happen. It was fun to watch it from home, though. I hadn't done that in a bit.
Okay.
So it was cool to kind of see how that was going and catch some coverage. Especially when you were on, I did enjoy that.
Yeah, that was a good one. I was in the booth this time with Mani Devuti. He did a very good job, and it was really cool.
Oh, I was just listening. Actually, I wasn't watching the screen. I thought it was you and Randy, but I could have sworn that's what was going on.
Oh my God. No, Randy's still retired. He's not on the team right now, but yeah, it was cool. It was here in Seattle. It was really close to where I live. So I was able to sleep in my own bed, be in my own time zone. And I got to say that goes a long way for these type of shows, because we got some long days back there. We work, 11-hour, 12-hour days most of the time on the broadcast days. So yeah, it was really cool. And we're going to talk about some of that too. We've got a little bit of a recap, and then also a couple of picks, or specifically one pick from the PT that I want to ask Luis about. We're going to get to that on the show. We're also going to talk one of a deck that Luis has been drafting a fair bit lately. Of course, answer a Patreon question of the week, do a crack a pack. It's all here. It's LR. It's happening right now. First, we want to thank our patrons, patreon.com/limited resources. Thank you to each and every person who supports us over there. It means a lot. And yeah, it's kind of the backbone of the show, so we really appreciate it. We are also sponsored by Ultimate Guard. That's a place to get the best accessories for your cards. There are many good companies out there that make this stuff, but if you want the best, you go to Ultimate Guard. If you've ever tried out their sleeves, the katanas in particular, or the deck boxes and stuff, they last a very long time. They're made with really high quality materials, and they pay a lot of attention to something that's important to me, which is how it feels in your hand. It's a very nice object to handle, and those little design perks that you get on stuff in your life can just make your life a little bit better, a little bit at a time. And I think that Ultimate Guard really nails that aspect of it as well. So if you'd like to check them out, it's ultimateguard.com to look at all their products and stuff. And if you want to buy anything, you can go to your favorite local game store or your favorite online retailer to check them out. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. One of the perks that you get for being a patron is you get access to our Patreon question of the week thread. This one comes from Connor, and it says, how do you improve a skill, for instance, Magic, when you feel that you've hit a natural plateau? I've played Magic for a lot of my life now. I've qualified for a few RPTQs. He put LOL in parentheses after that, and RCs, but I haven't continued improving just playing normally as I have. I feel stuck in that top eights consistently, but never wins part of the trench. I've heard that it can be extremely helpful for people to watch and give feedback on your gameplay, and I've considered coaching for this. In short, how do you learn to improve?
That's tough. I mean, figuring out how to improve is, one of the things that's tricky with really any good skill. And with Magic, I think that there's a couple things you can do. One is you have to actually take stock of like what you're doing, where your game is maybe at its weakest. There's a lot of ways to do that, but like figuring out like some people, and you can work around that too. Like some people are like, I don't play fast enough to play Esper mid-range in a tournament. I'll get too many draws. So you end up, kind of defaulting to faster decks. And I think that that's like a totally valid way to go about things. You can also, try to figure out ways to shore up your weaknesses. Like, okay, well, I'm not good enough with control decks, but sometimes that's the best thing to be doing. So I need to practice with those. Most of it will come down to, though, practice and kind of seeing how can you raise your level, like by watching other people or having a play group of equally motivated people. It's funny, wherever you are on the motivation scale, it's really good to have people who are around there. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to play in every PTQ every weekend, you go to 2 RCQs a weekend, and you're really into qualifying, and your friends aren't that into it, you're going to have a kind of bad time. But likewise, if you only want to play like here and there, and you're just trying to get good at the draft format, maybe play in the Arena Open, you want to find people who are on the same wavelength, because then you'll be able to prepare together and practice together. Ultimately, I would figure out what it is you want to accomplish, try to figure out as best you can what's stopping you from accomplishing that, and try to kind of make sure you have ways to increase your skill ceiling. And I think that's by playing with people better than you or watching people better than you.
Yeah, I think that most endeavors like this, a skill that you could learn, let's say, have a similar trajectory to them, which is that when you first start, you're really bad, especially if it's something that's difficult to do. And then depending on your aptitude for something of that type, you will make up ground in big chunks for some period of time. And then you will naturally hit a bit of a plateau, and that can be at a different point for different people. But that is the point at which the real work begins, because you don't get that positive feedback loop that you had been getting, where you're like, people are telling you like, hey, you're actually pretty good at this. And, you maybe pass up some people that have kind of plateaued a little lower than where you're going to. And you start to feel like, okay, this is working. I'm trying hard and it's working, and I'm seeing what I want to see. And now it's incremental. And, the way I like to describe this stage is like, you can't really feel the changes yourself, but people on the outside can. It's the kind of thing where like maybe you're playing a sport and you're trying, you're putting in the real work needed to get better at it, but you don't really feel like you are. But then if somebody, that you haven't played with in a couple of months shows up, they're like, whoa, you got better, and you're like, oh, did I? And, because you don't get those big leaps anymore. And this is where it takes the determination, the grit, the grind, that type of stuff to really get to that point. So it means, playing a lot, even though you're really improving small amounts at this point, they do add up over time. So that's one thing. I think that it's okay to be at a plateau. It's normal. And you have to recognize that you probably are making some improvement, even if it doesn't necessarily feel like it. Also, I think the point at which Connor plateaued with the I can top 8 a good amount, but I just basically never win, is kind of the most common plateau point for aspiring competitive Magic players, because now you're facing other people who have done the same thing, and you're kind of at the point of diminishing returns where, if you have a regular job, Connor, or if you have other interests in your life, relationship, kids, family, whatever it might be, your job, your career, etc. This is where you're going to have to start putting extra time into Magic to get yourself over that hump where, the returns aren't necessarily there, not just monetarily, but like it might take an inordinate amount of effort to get you from 85% to 90%. Compared to what it took you to get from 0 to 85. And that's just a personal decision that you have to make about whether you really want to put in that effort. The last thing I would say is that if you can focus your effort, Luis touched on this when he said, if you have an idea about what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, if you can focus on them, that really does help. That's the, all the studies and articles I've read about how to get better at stuff say that, you take one aspect of the thing that you're trying to get better at and you hammer it. You really go intense, hardcore on that one thing as much as you can and really try to get good at that. And then you move on to the next one. And as you do that, you'll start to see the pieces interlock and come together. And next thing you know, you're becoming a much more complete and better player as things go along. So keep it up, Connor. Also, it's pretty sweet that you're top 80 all the time. Like most people don't get to that point. That's pretty good too. Luis, I did have a question for you based on this, just because you're kind of a unicorn when it comes to this stuff, but I'm curious, did you when you decided, okay, maybe I'll try this PT thing, and, you were putting in all those hours with Paul, for that stretch of time and stuff, did you hit a plateau? Like, did you find yourself in a point where you're like, it's getting a lot slower for me to improve at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened is like me and Paul were kind of in the lab, and we were playing a ton with ourselves, and then our other two roommates, Matt and Eirik, and we were all getting better for sure. But we hit a point, and this is the point where me and Paul started playing on the PT regularly, where I don't think we were getting like a whole lot better. And the big jump for me is, unfortunately for Paul, this is after he left to go to Curacao. It was when I formed Team CFB. And it didn't come together as in like, let's make a super team. It came together as in, let's test with here's all my friends. I want to test with them. But, I've mentioned this before in other places. If you look at the original team of people who, when we got together, some of us had some accomplishments, some of us had very, very few, some of us had none, whatever. It was a range. The people who have gotten into the Hall of Fame from that original team is myself, Shuhei Nakamura, Martin Juza, Ben Stark, Brian Kibler, Owen Turtenwald, Eric Froelich,
Raptor,
and Paulo Vitor Damarosa.
Right.
Every single
was
person
with
on the
you
team
guys for a while. Yeah.
Basically of the 15 people on the team, something like 11 of us ended up making the Hall of Fame. And are there worlds where these people have great careers if they don't join the team? Yes, of course. I think Paulo was going to be a world-class Magic player no matter what. He already was. Did all of us make each other better? Definitely. And that was one of my biggest level up moments.
Yeah, that's a huge one for sure. And when you get to the level that Luis was at the time, he was already experiencing success on the Pro Tour, but that was where, he could really take that big step. So keep it up, Connor. I don't know. I feel like you're in a pretty good spot. Try to identify those weaknesses and hammer them, and I bet you'll keep getting better. Let's do a crack a pack, Luis, for Thunder Junction. Let's see what we got waiting for us here. All right, our first card out is Harrier Strix. That's the 1-mana, the blue 1/1 flyer. And when it ETBs, you can tap a permanent and you can pay 2 and a blue to loot.
I think in the world where there's a good blue aggro deck, this card could have been kind of sweet. I generally have not found myself playing it.
Yeah.
I have played it before. It's just there's not that many decks that actually want it. Blue has its role in this format, and it's actually, I think, a pretty good one. I suspect a lot of the better players, who really like playing control decks are doing well playing blue. I've seen people talk about it on Twitter, and you can look at the stats of some of the higher the high elo players. I think they do fairly well with blue. Mm-hmm. Not that it's a place you really want to be, but it's good with control decks, and it's not really good with aggro decks, I don't think.
Right. This to me is where I want 1-drops to lie, which is they have a home maybe, but they're not ubiquitous. It's not just blue, take it, play it, that's it. It's no, they're and this one, its home missed a little bit. So this one ends up not really, seeing very much play, but I'm okay with that too. Next is, this is a good one. It's Throw from the Saddle.
Yeah. I mean,
this used
best
to cost
green common
4.
for green white. Yeah. It's a very strong card. Definitely a card that you're going to want to take early, and certainly the pick right here. I mean,
definitely
it's a totally fine place to start.
Yeah. And, Throw from the Saddles, really highly, it's the best green common, if not the best common. And it is benefiting though from the really good creatures, right? In green, this effect is aggressively priced, but it is, it has some advantages over normal removal, but it also has some disadvantages too. But in this set, it just slots in there really nicely. Next is Armored Armadillo. That's the white 0/4 with Ward 1, and you can pay 4 mana to give it +X/+0, where X is this toughness. Never seen it activated.
No, I played against it a few times. I tried playing it once, and I'm not that impressed. So I would generally not play this card.
Yeah, another, by the way, missed 1-drop, and I'm really wondering if there's a correlation here, Luis, between this format just feeling it actually is fairly fast as a format, but it doesn't feel, you don't feel that way from turn 1. And I wonder if it's cards like Harrier Strix and Armored Armadillo that are, partially responsible for that. Next is Black Snag Buzzard. This is the 2 and a black 2/1 flyer. And when it ETBs, it gets a +1/+1 counter if a creature died this turn, and you can plot it for 1 and a black.
Yeah, not a card I'm really that into.
Meh.
I again don't think the black decks are that great at being aggressive. Some are, Red Black, for example, has definitely the ability to string together this outlaw aggro deck, but it's still not a card that those decks even are that excited about. So it just doesn't fit in most places.
Yeah. Also, it does get punished a little bit for plotting, right? It's they know, they can usually, if the +1/+1 counter is going to be a problem, they can work around it. Next up is Discerning Peddler. This is the 1 and a red 2/2, and when it ETBs, you can rummage.
I think it's a 2-drop.
Yeah, it's a 2-drop that is an outlaw. It
is an outlaw. Yeah.
Those are the things we can say about it. It's pretty medium. Next is Gin of Fool's Fall. This is a 4 and a blue 4/3 flyer, but you can plot it for 3 and a blue. Where are you at on this one?
Horrendous.
Horrendous.
Not a card I want in my deck. Like, it looked like it was okay in terms of stats and like, okay, maybe this is actually good. And there's some limited formats where this would have been like a really good card.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's a blue card that fits in the blue decks. Really not at all. Like, look, the way modern limited sets work these days, the worst common or the second or third worst common out of any color, still probably a card you can put in your deck and not lose much percentage. We're talking like you lose a couple percentage points, and Jin is like that. If you hand me a deck and it's like, oh, I had to play a Jin and Fool's Fall, it's like, yeah, that's not ideal, but you're not going to lose a ton because of it. It's still a fine card. It's a 4/3 flyer.
Right.
But it's just not a card that you should prioritize. I just think the blue decks, if they win, they do so by being defensive and casting, card draw and removal and counters and stuff like that. I haven't found them be aggressive, and this isn't even that great of an aggressive card.
Yeah. It is funny because the margins for where we'll go to horrendous are smaller, as you mentioned there. Last comment is Highway Robbery. It's 1 and a red for a sorcery. You can discard a card or sacrifice a land to draw 2 cards, and you can plot it for 1 and a red as well.
I like this card.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
it's a pretty well costed card. It's the best Tormenting Voice by so much that we've seen in a long time, but it's still not a card I'm going to take early. It just doesn't really do anything any of the good decks want to do, because the blue-red like plot sort of deck is just not really what you want to be. Yeah,
this is fairly typical, by the way, for the commons in the set. Like the green one, the only green common that we got is Throw from the Saddle, and it's just clowning all these other, like these ones aren't even considerations against it. Interestingly, Luis, we only got 1 rare for our pack, but we did get, of
just
course,
one.
Yeah, the requisite 5 uncommons. So we'll go through those. The first one is the breaking news one. It's Back for More. That's the 4 green black instant return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And when you do, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. I like that card.
Yeah, it's a good card. It's a pretty strong one. Like, you'll often cast it and get, a lot of value out of it. Like, if you get back a creature that costs 4 or 5 mana that eats one of their creatures, like, that's a very solid 2-for-1.
That's right. It never quite lets you get the 3-for-1 because it does fight, so it'll usually have damage on it, and then if you go to block with it, it'll usually finish off what's left. But it's not really a complaint. It's more just a note, because the card is very regularly a 2-for-1. And, getting whatever the best or biggest creature in your graveyard at instant speed is already pretty cool. And the fact that it fights can really turn the tables on your opponent. This is what I would pick right now. Next is Wrangler of the Damned. This is the 3 blue-white 1/4 flash. And at the beginning of your end step, if you don't cast any spells from your hand, you get a 2/2 flyer.
I have not found this card to be good very often, and it's got an abysmally low win rate, which kind of has lined up with my experiences.
Does it really? Okay, yeah. It's such a cool card, too.
I had exactly one deck where I had 2 of these, and I had a lot of instant speed interaction where I won a couple of the games off it, but most of the time, the games just... The problem is it's 5 mana. If it was 4 mana, let's say it was slightly smaller at 4 mana, like even like a 1/3 or something, or like a 2/2 or something, maybe you could string together. The problem is you have to take turn 5 off to cast this, and it doesn't do that much in combat, even though with flash. And then turn 6, you also have to not play a spell to get a 2/2. It just is not a really reasonable kind of ask to make.
Yeah, it is a lot to ask. I really like how it transfers the game over to this thing where you just keep passing until they deal with it, but it can be very punishing in that way. Next is Demonic Ruckus. This is the 1 in a red aura that gives the thing +1/+1 menace and trample, and then you can plot it for red, and then if the thing dies with this on it, you draw a card.
I mean, if you're aggressive, I think this card is fine.
I haven't played it yet. I seem to open it all the time, but I haven't actually played it. It's not a high pick.
No, it's not a high pick. I think it's just an okay card.
Next is Hellspur Brute. This is the 4 and a red 5/4 trampler with affinity for outlaws.
I actually like this card quite a bit.
It's
I
decent.
think Especially, it doesn't even have to be black red, really just any red aggressive combination. It can be pretty strong. The main problem is you don't really want to first pick a red card in this format. At least I don't. I would prefer to take, right now I'm probably just on throw for the saddle. As much as I like back for more, you just can't take a 6-mana black green card over a 2-mana green card. That's just not the way to draft.
You watch me, buddy. You watch me. All right, let's put it to the real test here. How about Intimidation Campaign? One blue, black, one ATBs. You drain them for 1 and draw a card, and whenever you commit a crime, you could bounce this thing back to your hand.
So the card's actually fine in blue black, and that's actually the deck I wanted to talk about today. But it's also not a card that you have to take early. It's like if you get one of these late, it goes a long way. Like it can be good, but it's not a card that I think you want to spend an early pick on.
No, it is very, very slow. You can think of it like like a good card draw spell, kind of a card draw spell that doesn't end, but the tax is heavy. It's 3 mana. They do pay you back by draining for 1. So it becomes like a sort of an alternate win condition / way to keep your life total up a little bit. And that does go a long way too. But this is the type of card that really excels in the right matchup where, like, if they're slow and you can just sort of grind away with this, it can really basically make it so that you draw 2 cards a turn for the rest of the game and drain them once. And that is a good thing, but soaking up 3 mana does add up. And if you don't build around it enough, then sometimes it sits on the battlefield for a while and it's pretty inefficient. That said, it's one of my favorite cards to just play in the set. I love it. Like, it's so sweet.
Oh, it's really fun. Yeah, I do enjoy playing the card. And look, if I'm already in blue black and I see one of these like 6 pick, I'm pumping the fist and being like, "Yep, we're doing it." This is how I'm going to win that long game. But first picking it, you can't do that. Or at least you shouldn't.
Definitely. Our rare is Free Strider Lookout. That's the 2 and a green 3/3 reach. And whenever you commit a crime, you can look at the top 5 cards of your library and put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. It only triggers once each turn.
Yeah, this card's pretty cool. I was just curious because I haven't played with this card yet. It does a lot worse than Throw from the Saddle in terms of win rate on 17.
Oh, it does? Really?
Yeah, which is kind of a shame. That does line up with what I thought would likely be the case, just because it's a card that requires you to commit a bunch of crimes, which green is not like the best at.
Yeah, that is true. I feel like how many do you have to do? How many crimes do you have to commit before you feel like you're getting your money back? Because they're spotting you a 3/3 reach for 3. It's like, it's not asking that much, right?
Yeah, but a 3/3 reach for 3 just isn't what it used to be. And green also, look, in the green desert deck, it is great. Turn 4, you play this, you play a desert, you ping them, you ramp. Like, it is a really good card. But the best green deck does happen to be like green-white, and Throw from the Saddle is really good in that deck.
Okay. I did not realize how much better Throw from the Saddle was than a card like Free Strider Lookout. And I would say that if I was sitting down day 2 of a GP when those existed, whatever, a serious draft that I actually cared about, I would probably take Free Strider Lookout over Throw from the Saddle, over Back for More, and then over Intimidation Campaign. Like, that's kind of my thing. But I learned something today, and I could just take the Throw from the Saddle then. Yeah,
that is... Like, if there's any mark against this draft format, it is probably that, like, just like every format, the thing that's the best, sometimes it's the best by like a little bit too much of a margin. Yeah. And this isn't like disaster by any stretch. I like this format a lot. I continue to play it. I've been really enjoying all the different kinds of decks there are. I think that's the strength of the format.
Yeah.
Would I knock 2 to 3 percentage points off green-white? Yes, I would.
There you go. But we're still in the happy range here. And like you said before, you can definitely draft maybe not every color pair, but most color pairs and have success with it. The PT. So as I mentioned, the PT was in town here in Seattle, but it had a really interesting twist that we talked about before last week on the show, which is that this format was only out for 10 days online. It was out for, I think, a couple of more days on paper, maybe. But, for people that were testing online or that weren't in the testing houses yet or whatever, they had 10 days end to end before they were sitting down to draft. And you could feel it. I talked to some of the, limited specialists from their teams and such, and it was definitely a factor. I walked around and watched some of the drafts. I covered the 2 feature drafts as well. And it definitely had a little bit of a shaky feeling, I think, Luis. It wasn't overwhelming. I mean, these are still pros and they still took their time to make sure that they knew what was going on, at least to a point. But it did feel like some of the more subtleties of the format, it was very apparent to me, especially watching the players play the games out, whether they had played a lot and just sort of knew how everything worked automatically, or whether it wasn't quite at the point where they're like picking up cards and reading everything. It wasn't like that, but it was just like a little bit of a step off from the players who looked a lot more experienced. Were you like in touch with the testing team and stuff for this one? Did you have any sense for that for Team CFB?
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to them and like to some degree, like the guys who were like Sam or whatever, who were around here and kind of paying some attention. They definitely put some time into limited to know what was going on with that. It is still pretty tricky to figure out. This, I actually kind of love the speed or the cadence here. I really wish that we would get, like, I hope for Amsterdam, for example, because I am planning on going to that, fingers crossed. We have a similarly small gap, because I think it really does reward the people who A, spend the time, and B, are good at picking things up quickly. And I tend to do both of those things. So it's not, when you add another week or 2 weeks, especially, some pre-Ts have been like multiple weeks, longer than this one. You end up in a spot where everyone knows at least, like, yeah, you're not supposed to pass this card, or this is obviously the best, color combination or whatever. That I don't think was the case for this format, from seeing people draft and talking to people who have drafted.
Okay. Yeah. Super interesting to watch it play out. And there was also some interesting picks that we'll talk about in just a little bit, but I know you wanted to kind of touch on like the broad strokes for the format, just things that you've noticed that, since I was gone at the PT or whatever.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things I actually suspect about this format, and we'll see where it ends up, is that there's going to be some metagame shifts and some rotations. Like, there's just a lot to discover here. I do think that green-white is going to continue to be the best, or like green-based aggro is going to be pretty high up regardless. Like, I don't think that's going to stop being the case. But I also do think that as people adapt to the format, as people play more and figure out the stuff that's maybe a little bit less obvious, you're going to see more people doing well with like 5 color decks. You're going to see, more blue-based control decks. And I just think there's a lot of ways to draft this format. Like a Grixis deck, you open Cruel Ultimatum and you go Grixis, all removal, 5 creatures in your deck. I think that's a valid deck. Like, I think you can win with that deck. And it's very cool to see kind of what the different possibilities are. And I don't think that we've kind of scratched the surface. I don't think we've fully explored every single part of this format, and there's a lot left to kind of discover here.
Okay. So you feel like there's a lot of runway for us still. That's cool. Because sometimes it does feel like it's already kind of done at this point, right? It's like
there's formats like Phyrexia, I was done a week into it. Like I hated the format. Playing it more because the PT did not change my mind on that. Like I still thought it was really, really terrible, And I think that there's been formats where a couple weeks in, because we're like a week past the PT now, effectively, a couple weeks in, I was like, all right, I've kind of had enough. I've had my fill of this. But this format hasn't really felt like that, and doesn't feel like it's getting that close to that either.
That's right. So the most can we talk about the draft, the PT draft?
Yeah, definitely.
So the most interesting draft, I think, on the weekend, the one that at least gave us the most discussion, was Seth Manfield's draft. And there was two I thought really big inflection points that generated the most discussion. So I wanted to talk about both of those with you, Luis. The first one was very early in pack 1. So he opened up.
And for what it's worth, I was actually watching you guys cast this live.
Oh, you were too? Great. Yeah. So as a recap for the listeners, so pack 1, pick 1 was Stingerback Terror, which is the dragon, the 2 red dragon that gets smaller based on card size, cards in hand. And it also has plot. Interestingly, for 2 and a red, by the way, which is worth noting because it is kind of splashable in some ways. And that was taken over Mystical Tether and Phantom Interference were the cards that he had pulled to the front, let's say. So right away, okay, it's a powerful card. It's a good rare, but it is in red and it is color intensive. If you end up being in red, it's double red. You can try to splash it. But, kind of starting already to say, okay, well, maybe I'm going down the red route here. But then it was interesting because pack 1, pick 2, the cards that Seth pulled to the front were Trained Erranks and Explosive Derailment. So Trained Erranks, the 3/1 for 1 and a white, and then Explosive Derailment is the red removal spell. What are your thoughts on that pick straight? I haven't told the listeners what was chosen at this point, but where would your mindset be at that point?
So so like Seth, I would have first picked the dragon and not been like thrilled about it, but done so. Like, I think that the dragon is good. I would much rather take a white card than a red card, but I just think Mystic Tether is just a lot worse than Stingerback Terror. Stingerback Terror is just a really good card. Second pick though, I would have taken the Derailment. I think by a decent margin. Like, when I watch Seth take the Erranks, I'm like, wow, Seth really does want to be white. And I want to say doesn't want to be red, but would rather take, I think, a fairly comparable white card. Like, I think Explosive Derailment and the Trained Erranks are at the very least close. Like, you can say the Erranks is better. I think it probably is a little bit better on its own merits because a 3/1 scry 1 first strike is just really good. But to take it over a red card when you first picked a red rare that's pretty solid, like that is a very strong statement right there. And I think that Seth indicated to me, like, I hadn't talked to Seth specifically. I didn't know where he was at in terms of, like, what does he want to do in this format or anything like that. But that indicated to me, like, he was pretty unhappy probably taking his first pick red card and really wanted to be in white. I would have just taken an Explosive Derailment. I think that, look, in for a penny, in for a pound. It's not like I'm like, oh yeah, our colors are set because of our first pick, but you have a good red rare. Just take the red card that's comparable to the white card. There's no reason to put yourself into a second color this early.
Mm-hmm. And so, as you said, he did end up taking the Trained Erranks, and then the third one, he took Prairie Dog over Collective Defiance. So you could tell that he, A, wanted to be in white more than he wanted to be in red, and B, that he maybe liked 2 drops or the aggressive strategy or something like that. And then so pack 1 was Stingerback Terror into Trained Erranks into Prairie Dog. Then he took Cunning Coyote, Discerning Peddler, Quilled Charger, Hellspur Brute, Mirage Mesa. So at this point, he's mostly red.
In the Collective Defiance pack, I think there was another Cunning Coyote too, because that's what I thought he was going to take. But I didn't. The Collective Defiance is one of those cards.
You are right about
completely
that.
Unreadable. So I couldn't when I was watching, couldn't tell that was a Collective Defiance.
Dude, tell me about it.
Yeah,
like, I don't even know what color it was.
There's a lot of there's a lot of reasons to be glad to not do coverage these days with how the cards are. Like,
they are ridiculous.
I look at these boards and they're incomprehensible.
Totally. I mean, yeah. In any case, I'm going to kick the soapbox to the side, but I agree with you.
Yes, I would have considered Cunning Coyote there, but it totally makes sense to take Collective Defiance instead. That card's also really good, but Seth took neither. He took the Prairie Dog, and then there was another Cunning Coyote, which that's the one he ended up taking.
Right, and then there was Discerning Peddler, Quilled Charger, Hellspur Brute, Mirage Mesa. So he took red card, white card, red card, land. So that's kind of where he's at. And then the end of the pack was maybe slightly interesting. He got a Gin of Fool's Fall, so blue card, an Ionize, a blue-red card, another Quilled Charger back to red, a Gold Pan, throwaway pick, and then he got a last pick Razzle Dazzler in blue. So, my thought process coming out of pack 1 is I'm in red. There's probably no getting around that at this point because, 3/4 of my picks or 2/3 of my picks are just red, and my best card, Stingerback Terror, is also red. It would be very difficult to just jump ship and not play the Coyote, the Peddler, the Hellspur Brute, etc. But I've got a little bit of white, right? I've got a Trained Erranks and a Prairie Dog. It's not like I have, some amazing cards. And then okay, I touched a little bit of blue at the end, but that wouldn't really be a big push for me because red blue's, not that desirable a color pair to be in. But I want to know what's your, like, if you have the pile that I just described, are you thinking that way too? Like, I can kind of go where I want? Are you thinking I'm red, white? Like, what's your stance?
Like once you've taken the first four red cards, you
No,
mean?
no, out of the whole entire first pack. Like the whole pack, you've got Stingerback, Cunning Coyote, Peddler, Quill Charger, Hellspur Brute. Yeah.
So you're assuming if I just took all red cards down the line, which is probably what I would have done.
Well, this is what Seth did. I mean, he took Prairie Dog and Trained Airings, but then all the rest of the cards were red until the end of the pack when he picked up a few random blue cards.
I got you. Okay. Sorry. I was having trouble understanding exactly what you're asking. You're asking if I was Seth at the end of pack one, where would I be thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I wouldn't have been Seth. I would have done things differently.
You would have had even more red cards, as it turns out.
I would have just had 2 more red cards, and then I would have been like completely open. If I was Seth, I would not have felt very comfortable about being red-white at that point, because you have 2 white cards, neither of which are like amazing. They're fine. They're good commons, or good uncommon, whatever. Both of which that you took picks 2 and 3 and saw no other white cards the entire pack that you wanted to take. Like, it is not like he saw 0. He just saw better red cards than white cards. So I wouldn't be thinking I was red-blue or anything like that, but I also wouldn't really be thinking I was red-white. I would be thinking, well, I'm red. Let's see what pack 2 brings.
So this is what pack 2 brought, and this got really interesting. So the 2 cards that ended up being in contention for Seth was Explosive Derailment. So this is the card that he passed for the Trained Airings pack 1, pick 2, and Bristly Bill Spine Sower, as in the 2-mana mythic that's, top, I think it's top 5 cards in the set or something. Way
Very
high
strong,
up.
yeah.
Really, really good card. Easy to cast, cheap, does a lot of work for you. And he went back and forth over these, and really interestingly, he decided to take Explosive Derailment. Again, a solid red removal spell there. One other note is that in pack 1, he saw like no green. Like he was not being passed anything playable in green. There was no giant beaver. He wasn't picking up. There wasn't like a random, a snakeskin veil, solid common, but you do see them go, 5th, 6th, 4th, whatever. Nothing. There was no green coming from that side either. And he really did go back and forth between Bristly Bill and Derailment, but ultimately took the Derailment. Which I don't know. What would your?
I would have taken the Bristly Bill there. I would have you got so hooked up in red pack 1, and here's what I would have tried to do if I were Seth. I would have thought, okay, well, I got a whole pack of red cards, like enough that if I had another pack like that, I'd have more than enough good playables. I'll take Bristly Bill, and I'll probably take 2 more green cards this pack, maybe a third, and then maybe pack 3 I get 1 green card, and then I have like 5 green cards in my deck. The rest are red, and I get this really good card. That's kind of where I would be at. So I would have taken Derailment in pack 1 over the Airings, and then I would have taken Bristly Bill pack 2 over Derailment, over the Derailment.
Yeah, that was kind of the critique that we had in the booth was, you are giving up a solid removal spell, but like you are relatively open on your second color with just the 2 okay white cards. It wasn't like he had some huge push, to go in that direction. As it turned out, he did end up taking the Explosive Derailment over the Bristly Bill. He passed it, and his deck ended up being red-white straight up. And his white cards were a Nurturing Pixie, the Prairie Dog, the Airings, a Sterling Keykeeper, that's the Tapper, One Last Job. He got a Mystical Tether, and he got a Prosperity Tycoon, and everything else was red. And his deck was pretty mediocre.
It didn't look amazing.
It was not amazing. I think he 1-2'd with it. The top end of his curve was 2 Hellspur Brute, and they were reasonably supported, but not amazingly supported. Again, that thing cares about outlaws. And he had a few, but it was like half his creatures or something were outlaws, because he had a bunch of animals like prairie dogs and trained Airings and stuff. But it did allow him to run 16 lands, and he had a fairly smooth curve with, kind of a cab style deck. Like everything really just cared about getting the opponent dead and that kind of stuff. I think he 1-2'd though, with the deck overall.
Yeah. I mean, that I would expect his deck to go 1-2 or 2-1 most of the time, which, Seth is a very skilled player. I think he probably averages close to a 2-1 in most PT drafts, probably less, because I think it's hard to do too much better than that. Like my guess is he's in the like low 60s win percentage. Having not looked it up.
I would assume that too.
60 and 62% based kind of on my,
which is
my
about
judgment.
as good as you get. I mean, Seth is a world-class limited player. He's one of the best on the tour. So, you know, it is what it is, but I didn't get a chance to talk to him about it. I am curious about, you know, how close those picks were for him. The thoughts on the Erinks pick. Is it an aversion to red? You know, was he just sort of trying to look for an excuse to jump ship on red basically, and get into another color early? Just, you know, you don't want to commit to a color because you picked one freaking rare, right? Like that is not advisable. And red and blue are considered the two worst cards in the set as well. So anyway, interesting stuff from him. I'm curious what our listeners would do there as well, particularly with the Bristly Bill pick, you know, because what you broke down, Luis, was exactly what my thoughts were, which is, yes, you are not going to get green in pack 3, but you passed no green at all in pack 1. Like nothing came through you. The people to your left have absolutely no reason to think that green is open at all, and neither do you. So you should pick up 2, 3, or 4 playables in green out of this pack. And even if you get completely hosed in pack 3, you can still come up with playables because, you know, it doesn't always work out like that either. Sometimes you don't get completely hosed. Sometimes somebody to your right opens up 2 really good green cards and you get a pack 3 pick 1 or a pack 3 pick 2 solid green card, even though it is still being cut. And then sure, in the middle of the, you know, 3 packs in, you're not seeing anything else, but sometimes you just get lucky there too. But to me, you know, having a card like Bristly Bill is a game changer. I mean, that is a card that can absolutely win the game on its own. And if left unchecked, will.
I mean, look at it this way. You also got past no white cards pack 1. Like, why do we even think white is better than green in this instance? Like, they're both going to get cut in pack 3.
Totally.
And it's not like the Erinks and the Prairie Dog, like 2 drops are like you know, it's something you're really super happy to be running.
No, totally.
Like as a 1 of 5 white cards, I mean.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're totally fine in your deck, but like if those are your only 2 white playables, yeah, you're not exactly running towards that color. Tough seat, I will say for Seth. That first pick I think was more straightforward than he made it. I think you just take the red removal spell and just move on to the next pick. But the Bristly Bill was definitely a fork in the road for him about, am I really going to try to go upstream here and take this one really great rare, but then just and by the way, I will note, this, again, I don't think this would be the safe assumption based on the timing, but he also got absolutely no green in pack 2 either. Like I wanted to look back. I never got a chance to, but I want to know how many people were in green at that pod because it was not flowing in either direction. He just, like, literally that would have been his only green card. Like if he had taken it, he would have had to put it in his board anyway. Not that matters for the decision point, but it was interesting that like green was being cut so hard in pack 1 and he saw none in pack 2 either. It's like something screwed up there. So, you know, too many people are in green or something because, you know, that's not supposed to be how that works. But it would have been interesting if he had taken it and not been able to play it anyway. Okay. You wanted to go over an archetype that you've been playing a bit lately.
Yeah. I want to talk about Dimir. So
yeah.
It's a combination of the worst color or one of the worst colors in blue, and black. That. And one of the things I like about this archetype here is that we're used to like the removal plus card draw archetype just kind of being bad. It has been in a bunch of sets now, and I actually think that's
both of those categories have gone down, right? Removal and card draw. It's like, oh no.
So. Dimir is actually just a control deck. Like it's got there's some of the new themes in it with like crimes and deserts and whatnot. I'll touch on that, but It is really just removal and card draw. You're trying to use those two things, and you're trying to use them in kind of combine them in such a way that you end up getting to basically kill their stuff at good rates and then play your card draw spell and pull ahead. And it's tale as old as time. The way you get into the deck is mostly that you open a good rare. I mean, that's, in those colors, that's the way to get into every deck. Maybe we should just even say that's like one of the,
that's a default,
the kind of baseline things. But you can also, the most common way I do get in besides that is I take a couple black removal spells, like you first pick a Shoot the Sheriff or a Desert's Due, and then you get a Unfortunate Accident or like Consuming Ashes, maybe a Vault Plunder in there. So my first like 3 to 4 cards, let's say I just start with a bunch of black cards, and then fifth pick, it's like, oh, there's a Plan the Heist or a Marauding Sphinx or a Slickshot Lockpicker, like usually a premium blue card. Not I don't mean a Phantom Interference fifth pick. You can get those kind of at will, or Jailbreak, Scheme or anything like that. I mean one of like the decent blue uncommons. And when I see when I see one of the, like the lock pickers or a Plan the Heist, it's like, oh, that's exactly what I want with all my removal here. And you can kind of combine that and end up in blue black where your priorities are finding ways to kill their stuff, finding ways to pull ahead once you've done that. Snakeskin Veil and take up the shield are like your number one enemies here, but you can still win without, even if they have one of those. And the way I would kind of approach this deck is like you're looking at like removal. At common you have like Desert's Due, Consuming Ashes, Phantom Interference, Jailbreak, Scheme. Skullduggery can be good though. Sometimes you're a little creature light, so Skullduggery doesn't work all that well. And then the second thing you want to look for is funny. It's not actually card draw. It's usually Deserts, because Deserts do 2 things for you. One, they fix your mana, especially if you're taking the Soured Springs, the blue-black one. But mostly it's like any half on color desert I'm kind of interested in. I don't really want to play a green-white desert in my blue-black deck, but I'll play blue-red deserts. I'll play black-white deserts. Those are all fine. Because they do 2 things for you. One is they commit a crime, and there's some pretty solid uncommons that care about that. Not as much at common, like the common crime payoffs are not that interesting, but the uncommon ones are very good. And then the other thing they do is they help you splash, and this deck can pretty easily splash off-color things. So I end up being pretty happy splashing a lot of the cards in this archetype. If I get like, I try to line up my desert so it's like, oh, I've gotten an Eroded Canyon. So the blue-red desert, and then I want the black-red desert, and then now I can splash a red card, whatever that card may be.
Right.
And that can work out pretty nicely. You also want card advantage, like I mentioned. So we're talking at common cards like Seize the Secrets and Vault Plunder being the best one by far. And then uncommon, there's a bunch of ways to draw extra cards. And then one card I want to specifically mention is Desperate Bloodseeker, the 2-mana 2/2 lifelink that mills for 2, because it commits a crime. It is a 2/2 lifelink 2-drop, so it like gives you a pretty good bolster when it comes to life total.
Yeah.
And you can end up using it in a lot of different ways. So I have been really happy with Desperate Bloodseeker. It's a card I take, at a pretty high rate.
Do you ever target yourself?
Definitely. You should probably target yourself on first blush, unless you have something that cares about crimes or it's getting late enough that it looks like milling them out is going to be a real possibility.
Okay.
And then once you've kind of got those commons, what you really want to look for is uncommons. There's a lot of really good ones. Blue actually is pretty strong at the uncommon level. You have Marauding Sphinx, you have Slickshot Lockpicker, you have Plan the Heist, you have Metamorphic Blast. Like these are all pretty good. And in terms of win conditions, Deep Muck Desperado is pretty good. I'll talk about that in a sec when I talk about the crime payoffs.
That's your boy. That's your boy right there.
Yeah. Black has a lot of awesome removal at uncommon as well. Shoot the Sheriff, Tyrant Scorn, Murder, Unfortunate Accident. Repulse is blue, but also just a really, really good one to want to play as well. And you can end up with a ton of great removal, a ton of card advantage, and then some good crime payoffs. So like we're talking cards like Intimidation Campaign, Lazav, Deep Muck Desperado. Like crime is not a big focus of this deck. It's kind of funny. The 5-color deserts deck, not super about deserts specifically.
Right.
The blue-black crime deck, it's not really like about crime that much.
Right.
But you once you kind of start playing the deck out, like you'll have sometimes you have Nathan the 03 flyer, the invitational card, a Student of the Mind or whatever.
Duelist of the Mind, yeah.
Duelist of the Mind, that's what it was. And you'll have reasons like that to want to be playing crime stuff, but most of the time you can just play this as a classic blue-black control deck, which is part of why I've enjoyed it, but with a splash here and there. But I think that the combination of actual good card advantage, like Plan the Heist, 4-mana, draw 3 cards, that is not a bad card. And if you can plot it and set it up to surveil as well, like that, you will just win that game. It's so easy to win a game if you're just like trade for your thing, cast a draw 3.
Yes.
Just right there. And this deck can do that. So I've liked this deck. I have found it worth getting into this deck, and there's a lot you can do to kind of make make this sort of deck work. Just bear in mind, you'll lose some games to Snakeskin Veil.
Yeah, totally. Like you said, those two cards, Take Up the Shield and Snakeskin Veil, are definitely the natural predators for this deck. There is some amount of play that you can give to play around them. Don't be afraid to main phase your instance if your opponent's tapped out, or upkeep it if you think that they have it and they have the mana available anyway. But you're forced to kind of, use your spell. If this is what is going to happen anyway, then, at least to make them use their mana on their turn. Little ways to try to gain edges back on that mana, because those cards are blowouts. Like it feels like they always have a Snakeskin Veil, and then they always do. And then it always feels really bad whenever they cast it. But this deck is super fun. I agree with you. And I really like it when I can get the crime stuff going, like you said, on a game in and game out basis, crimes are kind of incidental, but there are specific payoffs that really do reward you. Intimidation Campaign is definitely my favorite, but you like the Deep Muck Desperado, right?
Yeah, I think Deep Muck Desperado is good. A 3-mana 2/4 is just a good blocker, and when you get 3 mill triggers off them, like you can actually pressure them. I've had a lot of games with these blue decks go to someone being decked even without a whole lot of milling. I do want to mention, by the way, I think Archive Trap's just a great card, but at this point, like if I see Archive Trap early, I will just take it and try to build around it. I think that's something you can do.
This was also the case at the PT. Did you hear about that?
Yeah. No, I think there's I'm not surprised that the people who've tested a lot have come to the conclusion that Archive Trap is a good card to put in your deck.
Yeah, I think it was Jason Yee. At any rate, it was a 2 Archive Trap deck.
Two of them is obviously
2 is busted.
Bonkers.
Didn't you have 2 in that really early draft?
Yeah,
you did?
I did.
Yeah.
It was really easy to win.
And it was super easy. And it was a 3-0, and it was only through milling. Like the whole deck was designed to take advantage of those Archive Traps, and they actually do a good job. It's just an
angle of attack that almost no one can stop. Like you have to have Binding Negotiation or Phantom Interference, like counter spells or discard, which most decks are not really, able to kind of utilize.
Yeah, and you're also taking advantage of the fact that Archive Trap was made for constructed, not for limited.
Yeah, milling 13 is like half your deck.
Exactly. And so that's a thing. And, but I tell you, man, like this is what the last couple of formats were missing for me, were things like that. Like my opinion has been solidified through the PT that the breaking news sheet is awesome. It is right up there with any of the other bonus sheets that we've had that we've really liked. It is along the same lines of why we like bonus sheets and why they're really cool. But the extra 2 bonus sheets, I could leave them. Like I know they only come up like 1 out of 8 times or whatever it is, but like they add a bunch of extra complexity. And to me, they don't add anything to the limited format because they are so rare that like, it's almost like, should I even bother learning these cards, memorizing these, factoring these into my decisions, because they come up so infrequently and so many of them feel so out of left field. They don't line up with the format, or it's just like, why is this card even, why could I open this card in a pack that I'm drafting type scenario? That I would love it if they would just do the 1 bonus sheet. I think that, there's marketing concerns or whatever that these things fill in that, aren't my concern as a drafter or whatever.
Exactly.
But I really like the breaking news sheet. I wish that they would have gone a little less hard on the artwork for it. As you mentioned earlier, Luis, that it really is difficult. Like you can't even tell at a glance what color these are, if they're gold, if they're a single color, because they have that washed out look of trying to look like a faded newspaper, which I think is aesthetically kind of cool. But like these are game pieces for us too. Like they're not just pictures. So, I wouldn't mind it if they were a little punchier with the colors, or if the mana symbols themselves were full color or something like that. But that's more of a nitpick. You get used to them. But the cards themselves, I think, are great. And I'd love to see this type of formula used where, to me, the 2 categories of cards for a bonus sheet that I really, really like are cards from the past that fit the archetypes that exist here. So that's, Back for More, that type of thing. Those are great. They fit in, and they just give you the license to use perfectly placed reprints without having to take up a slot in the actual set with another reprint. And I think that that's elegant, beautiful, great. And then I think that they can have enough leeway with the one slot things like these where they can put in Cruel Ultimatum, right? They can put in like cards that you just would never be able to justify shoehorning into a deck like this or a set like this outside of it, where it's like, it's so cool. We saw Cruel Ultimatum on camera. Like, people were doing this. This is a thing that people do in the format, but it doesn't come up all the time. And it's not taking like a real slot in the set, because it would just feel so out of left field to have a card like Cruel Ultimatum or Villainous Wealth in here. And so it gives you that every once in a while you'll open them up and it gives you something to aim for. And, you know, that to me is the key to longevity is build arounds, or, I guess you could call them like side quests or something like that, where it's like, I'm going to try to do something screenshot worthy to send to my friends, but that doesn't make me feel like a complete doofus for trying it. Right. And I really think that they did a good job on this one of that. And again, we saw these cards at the Pro Tour. Like, these mattered in Pro Tour matches. So it isn't just memes. It isn't just screenshots to your buddies. This is like actually, you know, cards that matter in the format. Archive Trap, Cruel Ultimatum, like these cards were winning games too. And I think they really nailed it with that. So that part was really cool. We had one moment in the booth that was kind of funny. Monty, he was actually trying to prove this point, and I guess he did, but he asked me what I thought about a card. It was like, is it Nexus of something or whatever? It's on one of the bonus sheets, but I'm like, I don't remember what that is. Like
Nexus of Becoming.
Like Nexus of Becoming. Is that it? Yeah. I'm just like, he's like, what do you think about the card Nexus of Becoming? And I'm like, I don't know. And it's off the big score sheet or whatever. And it like basically draws you another card every turn and does something else. But I didn't remember, you know, and I was like, I don't know. And he's just like, oops. And, but anyway, it was in somebody's deck and whatever. But it was interesting because, you know, this was a really quick turnaround. Like, I probably would have ran into that card, you know, if given a little bit more time with the format. Yeah. But like, it does show that, like, I'm the PT commentator and I'm like, what is that one again? Like, that's not, you know, that probably means you have a few too many cards in your set, something like that. But
look, I think one of the best ways to add longevity to a draft format for the people who like to draft a lot are just seeding cards like Cruel Ultimatum, cards like, you know, Luris or
Villainous Wealth, me baby. Yeah, Luris is a good example.
Basically, any of these cards where like one card slot gets you a bunch of extra like equity in drafts, like just new decks to draft, all that stuff.
Yeah,
and I think that, you know, this set scores pretty highly on that. Archive Trap, right, by itself is already like, all right, there's an extra deck that we can draft and we can, you know, kind of figure out ways to do cool things with.
Yeah, totally. So anyway, let's call it a show there, Luis. I'm still coming right off of the PT, and I'm like basically driving to California tomorrow. Somehow, I don't know how I managed to schedule these things so close together, but yeah, I've got a thing for the watch website coming up. So I'm going to be back by early next week. So we'll do the show on time like normal next week as well. But I should probably go take care of stuff, and I'm sure you've got like kids ready to come home or something like that on your end. So we'll call it a show there. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis's LSV pretty much everywhere. If you want to check out our sponsor, it's Ultimate Guard, again, ultimateguard.com, or you can go to your favorite local game store or online retailer to check out their products. They are excellent. They really are. Thank you to all of our patrons, of course. And if you want to find everything related to the podcast, it's lrcast.com. And it has a link to all of our stuff, Luis's YouTube channel, everything on the front. And then all the episodes that we've ever done are available there for streaming, listening on the site. You can download them there as well. Like, you can do whatever you want. They're all there. And again, that's lrcast.com. That's going to do it for this week. We'll see you next week.
So it's been a blast from the past. I don't know if you're familiar with Winston Draft. It's
I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very fun format. It's a one-on-one draft format, and it's been around for a long time. When you start with 3 piles of one card in front of you, you look at the first pile. If you'd like it, you take it. If you don't, you put it face down and then put another card on top. You don't know what that card is. Same with second pile, same with third pile. If you don't want anything from the 3 piles, then you get a random card off the stack and you draft with usually like a 90 card pool between 2 people, kind of like just a normal draft pool. Mm-hmm. And me and Cheon, when we lived together many, many years ago, like when we were in college, we used to Winston draft against each other all the time. And it's funny, we just started doing that again here with the Cube server. So I haven't played against Paul. He's been too busy getting to rank 1. Well, actually rank 2, I think, is a more attainable goal in OTJ. But
so he's running from you?
Yeah, exactly. We've been doing a lot of Winstons, and it's funny. I'm actually developing a cube list for it because there's some cards that kind of don't work in that format, and there's plenty that do. So it's been a lot of fun.
You guys are doing heads up Winston drafts on the Cube server now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and you junkies. Good Lord.
It's a little dangerous because you can play them pretty fast.
You can go right through them. So you draft you end up with a big pile, right? And then you build your deck. And then what are you playing, like one match against a person and that's that?
Usually best of 3 or best of 5. Usually it depends on what you're feeling.
Oh, man. And this is danger zone.
Yeah, it's been fun. So I've been jamming Winston's, and I'm probably going to spend some time thinking about the format now that I've started to get into it, as one does.